Welcome, everyone. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we work to bring you stories of people doing interesting things in and around the world. Our goal is always to find that intersection between service and our interests of innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. And today we're going to be talking with Eilif Trondsen. He is a person who has been in our area here in Silicon Valley for almost 40 years, in part to focus on possibilities for getting innovators in the Baltic and Nordic regions of Europe connected to Silicon Valley. And he is going to tell you much more about that, but I would say that, there is that which is important to all Rotarians, the four-way test, and one of those is to build better friendships and build understanding and better friendships. And I think that this is exactly the kind of program that allows us to see how that can happen in the technology space. So with that, I will hand it over to Eilif for his presentation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Russian, and I'm happy to be here and to talk a little bit about Silicon Vikings and how I got to Silicon Vikings. I will be quite brief in discussing a couple of organizations that I've been working with leading up to my work in Silicon Vikings, because I think that at least part of the value that I bring to the Silicon Vikings, which is a professional networking organization connecting the Nordics and the Baltics with Silicon Valley and building what we call innovation bridges. That's what we are focusing on. And what I bring to the organization, I think, is my experience and the professional networks that I built up in my years of working in the Valley, close to 40 years, is what Russian said. And that time has been spent with two organizations in the Valley, more particularly in Menlo Park. So I'll go to the, and actually before I do that, I have one slide with a little bit of background on myself. I started at SRI as an economist, and I worked as an international economist and in various other parts of economics for a number of years, starting in 1979 at SRI. But as you can see on the curve on the left here, my interest in economics has slowly declined, and other things have come into play here, especially entrepreneurship around education and learning, which I call edupreneuring. So I'm most happy when I work at the intersection of technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, and learning and education. And that's what I've been spending years on at SRI and at SBI. Now, SRI, as you see in this slide, is an interesting organization that kind of sits between universities and national labs and corporations. So we are an applied research organization. I think we have around 2,000 people working in Menlo Park. And a lot of people with white lab coats walking around and thinking very deep thoughts on a lot of issues, from robotics to biotechnology to artificial intelligence and you name it. And so I'm a little bit of a strange animal in that context, because I'm not a techie, I'm an economist by training. So it's been fun working at SRI with all of these people doing technology research. But after doing that for about 20 years, the people in my group saw that SRI was spinning out companies, taking, and often people working in laboratories were spun out and started companies around technologies. But this group, which is now called Strategic Business Insights, we wanted to be our own company. So we became an employee-owned stock ownership and ESOP. in year 2000. So since 2000, this group of around 50 people, located on the SRI campus, so nothing has changed. I have the same office as I always had, but we work on the things that you see on the slide. There are a number of what we call multi-client research programs: Explore, Val, Scan, CFD, and then the insights we gain in doing that research, we leverage on the right-hand side, on the consulting side, where we do scenario planning, opportunity discovery, strategic road mapping, and so on. So that's a group that I worked in since year 2000 on the SRI campus. So that takes me to Silicon Vikings. So we are a 20-year-old organization, started as kind of a Swedish networking organization, but over the years we became more truly representative of the whole Nordic region, and in recent years also of the Baltics, so Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, because they are very close to the Nordic arena, and there's close collaboration between the Baltics and the Nordics, particularly with Finland. So as you can see on the slide, there are a number of special interest groups. And I have, from the beginning, led the special interest group on entrepreneurship and learning, because that's where my interest lies. So the interesting part about that is that I end up interacting a lot with young, smart, interesting Nordics and Baltics who want to take over the world. And to do that, they need to build a network. They need to gain access to capital. They need to come and visit the valley, because this is where they can get the significant amount of capital they need to take over the world. Now, if you're in oil and gas, you can also get a lot of money out of the Nordics. But if you do something, let's say in ed tech, there aren't that many investors in the Nordics that are really familiar with ed tech and so on. But in Silicon Valley, we have half of all the ed tech accelerators in the United States are in Silicon Valley. So we have a lot of investors and a lot of people who understand ed tech, and that's an area that I've been working in for also a number of years. And over the last year, I've been doing a research project that I basically wrote the proposal for, but the project has kind of been owned by Silicon Vikings. And in that project, I mapped out the edtech industry in the Nordics. So what we do in Silicon Vikings is to provide as much help and assistance as we can to actually anyone who comes from the Nordics and Baltics. While most of the people are entrepreneurs, as we talked about, they can also be academics from business schools and universities and research organizations. They could be government officials. We get a number of delegations coming to the valley because they feel they need to come here and smell the air, and by doing so, they become innovative and understand more about technology and innovation and entrepreneurship and so on. So there is a fair bit of what I call technotourism, and we try to avoid some of that and only spend time with those who are serious in building long-term relationships, as opposed to coming to spend a week and just drink wine and hear about what's happening in the valley and go back and forget all about what they heard and go back to life as normal. So we really look for people who want to build long-term relationships and build companies that will last. And so we do a lot of events under these special interest groups. In fact, I think I had on my slide here, yeah, the next slide here show the events that I have organized so far this year, and I think I'm not going to do any more events this year. The last one I did, in fact, was just last Wednesday on the topic of China and Silicon Valley, future tech competition, collaboration, and management models. That was an event I put together, and we had at Stanford University on Wednesday. We had about 40 people that came to that particular event. There were quite a few people from Stanford University, but also from other parts of Silicon Valley, including, of course, many Nordics that showed up who are now interested in China. Who is not interested in China these days, given what is happening over there? And I happen to have a professor friend at Stanford who is an expert on Asia as well as on China. I have a colleague at SRI who's currently leading two projects, building kind of innovation institutes in two parts of China. So he was a panelist, and then I had a young Chinese venture capitalist, and then I had a young Swedish woman who's just written a book on emerging management models in China. So that is an example of the kind of events that we put together in order to bring people together, to network, to learn about each other, to learn what is happening in the Valley and so on. And it's a great opportunity for people to really connect with people in the Valley, as well as people from the Nordics, and learn something about what's happening in the Nordics. And I think I referred to some of my colleagues at Silicon Vikings. We have an executive committee of 4 people, and each of those 4 people have lived and worked in the Valley from between 30 and 40 years. So, so cumulative, between the 4 of us, we have quite a few years of working experience in Silicon Valley. So we can leverage that network as much as we can to help entrepreneurs. And I think almost every week I am contacted by people from the Nordics, very often entrepreneurs who are working on education and learning technologies, because they know that's where my passion lies. So I meet with them and hear what they're trying to do, and whether I can maybe be of assistance in helping put them in contact with some of the people who can be helpful. The last slide I have in this very brief presentation shows a little about the growing Nordic presence in the Valley. And it's been interesting in that it is growing quite a bit, although it's hard to put numbers on some of these things. The numbers on this slide are a bit dated, but as you can see there, it says Sweden and Denmark has about 3,000-4,000 people in the Valley, is what I have seen for each of them. Norway has somewhat smaller, and then Finland smaller still, but it is growing, and so it's not clear what it is today, but I know for sure that we have a lot more entrepreneurs and startup companies coming into the Valley, and many of them come to Palo Alto, where the Nordic Innovation House is. So students, professionals meet either with us or with what I call bridge organizations. These are other organizations that deal specifically with each country. So Innovation Norway works only with Norway. Innovation Center Denmark works only with Denmark, and so on. Vinnova with Sweden. Silicon Vikings sits on top of all these bridge organizations, and we have a great relationship with them, and they appreciate the work that we do, and we do not try to interfere with what they do, but we try to augment and collaborate with them. So, and we, as well as the bridge organizations, are now starting to work more with larger companies as well. And then we're starting to do more research. So there've been some changes, and that's what we like to see. But we will probably continue to primarily serve startup companies, because they need us more than the large companies who have resources and they have funds and so on to get help elsewhere. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a background of the organization, what we do, and so on. And I'll be happy to answer a few questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll go ahead and maybe stop sharing those slides. I'll introduce you to one of our members who has joined us for the recording tonight.
Okay.
From Kamloops, British Columbia, we have Roger Plested. Now, I'll pass it along to you, Roger, for the first question, if you like.
Yes, thank you for your talk. I enjoyed it. It seems that your organization is basically a networking type of organization.
Right.
Where you meet up people who have very similar interests, and particularly for raising funds in order, and tying that into ideas and future entrepreneur projects.
Right. Yeah.
One of the, I think, I'll give a bit of levity to all the situation. A friend of mine gave to me her mother's Nordic cookbook, and it was dated about 1920, the edition. And one of the comments in the introduction was that a bride in Norway, to be a good bride, had to know how to cook herring in 100 different ways.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, I don't know about that. Of course, Norwegians love herring, that's for sure.
Yes.
So I'll jump in. I'm curious if there are components of Norwegian culture, or perhaps the Nordic cultures more generally, in terms of how companies normally develop, that have proven challenging for people as they begin to see what happens here in Silicon Valley. Is there a cultural barrier that you have seen happen, kind of on several occasions, that has been interesting to you in some way?
Well, I don't know if there's a cultural barrier. I think one of the things that I have observed in recent years, I think there's been quite a bit of change in the Nordics. First of all, it used to be that people at universities were not particularly interested in starting companies. So there's a barrier to, there was an interest. Most people who did well in school would like to work for big companies and have have a good, safe job in a big company. Everyone knows the risks involved in working with a startup and so on, and Norway has never been particularly successful in startup companies. I think Sweden is a bigger country. It's twice as big as Norway, and so the Swedes have probably been building global companies more than Norway has. We have a few large companies, but they've been mostly resource-based and so on. But in the last 5 years, there's been a dramatic change, not just in Norway, but across the whole Nordic and Baltic region. And suddenly, people want to start companies. And they are ambitious. They have global ambition. And that's why they now feel they have to come here. And because they need to learn, they need to scale. I think there is a common problem among many startup companies around the world. And in fact, I saw a report about this coming out of Canada too. And that is Canada has a lot of successful small companies, but scaling them to become global competitors, that is a big challenge, because they don't have a lot of people with that experience who can do that, particularly in the sales and marketing function. We have good engineers you can find anywhere, including in Norway. We have a lot of excellent engineers, and they can build good products. But selling them and taking a company globally and scaling a company, that is a challenge. And that's why you need to come to the Valley to find people who have plenty of experience in doing that. So.
Very cool. And Roger, did you want to speak to the Canadian kind of angle on that?
Yes, one of the things that I've noticed with my interaction with my Norwegian friends and Swedish friends is that they tend to be very innovative and also very hardworking. One of my friends, for instance, raised buffalo for a number of years. And when he got rid of his herd, one of the things that he took up, because he saw a need for it within the community, was to do trailers to transport buffalo.
Oh.
And he does it in his shed.
Okay.
And he's built up a little business now where he sells and markets about 100 of those units per year, which
Wow.
raises him, which gives him a net profit of about 80,000 per year. And he does that in his spare time. But this is an idea that came out of his mind, and being very innovative, and also because he's hardworking in that, he puts it together. But they tend to have that work ethic, and also are able to look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's true. I must say though that in addition to having a good work ethic, I think the Nordics also take their vacations very seriously.
Yes,
and they have long vacations. They take at least 4 weeks in the summer, and they typically don't like to work during their vacation. They take 4 weeks straight, and when I look back now and think about, could I go back and do that, or I'm not sure that would fit my lifestyle now. I would like to take shorter breaks and have a blurry boundary between leisure and work, and not take 4 weeks like that. I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. But Norwegians and Nordics in general, they like doing that.
Speaking of
however, I will
play hard. I think there's a story that I think is quite inspirational that you told me when we met, that your original trip over here to California was not based on economics or on innovation or anything like that. I believe it was based on soccer. And I think there's a cool lesson there for everybody if you can tell that story in the next few minutes. That would be great.
Yeah, and your timing is impeccable, Rushton, because today there was a big soccer game in Norway. My club team won the Norwegian championship as underdogs. And so they hadn't done this for a number of years. So yeah, I grew up playing soccer in Norway. I was passionate about soccer, and when I came to the United States after working my way over on a freighter, Norwegian freighter, came here, and the plan was to go back to Norway after a year. but then I ended up getting a soccer scholarship and played my way through college. So that's the only way I could have stayed, because I had no money to pay for my education. So soccer came in very handy, and as I told you when we had lunch, I said I like to play hard and work hard. Yeah. So I think that's a good motto. I think whether you're on the soccer field or you do sports or do anything else, you have fun. Do it in a big way, and but also when you work. And so since I did that on the soccer field, it paid off very nicely.
Clearly so. And we're kind of hitting the 10-minute mark on our Q&A, and I'll ask you in a minute to give kind of a final word to those who have watched this, so our members and guests. Before I do, I'll go through some logistics, but if you want to kind of have in your head kind of that last piece of encouragement, feel free. To all of those who have joined us this week, thank you very much for visiting our club. The Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley is dedicated to service and in all its forms. Our particular interest is figuring out how technology can serve the business of service. And our goal is always to see how innovation can be a part of inspiring people to see new possibilities for helping others. Make sure that you let us know you were here. The attendance form just down if you scroll down just a little bit past what we have here, you'll find that, and make sure to let us know. We always want to have a good sense of who's joining us each week. We're also very appreciative of guests, other Rotarians from other clubs who may be taking this story back to their clubs to hopefully inspire them as well. Finally, leave a comment in our discussion area at the bottom, the Discuss, D-I-S-Q-U-S area, for not just to give your impressions of the meeting and the program, but also to reply to those who have left comments ahead of you over the course of the week. And so we hope that we will see you week after week as we look to find all sorts of wonderful and interesting people to come and talk to us about all kinds of ways that they are making great things happen around the world. So with that, I'd like to give the last word to Eilif and have you finish off our program.
I'm sorry, what was the last?
I'd like to give you the last word for all of those who have watched the recording.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate the invitation to speak to all of you, and feel free to follow up if there is something about Silicon Vikings that you either find on our website or questions you have. Please contact me. I think my contact information is on the slide presentation that I presume will be posted. And so thank you so much for the invitation, Rushton. I enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Roger. Thank you for joining us. And all of you who have joined us this week, thank you very much. We will see you again next week.